What would you do if you found out that the team you gave your all to in a race lied to you on purpose, just to protect their image? Well, that's what Norris and Piastri experienced. Today I reveal to you the case that has put McLaren at the center of an unprecedented ethical storm. Formula One is not just about speed and adrenaline. It is a sport built on trust. Trust between engineers, strategists, and pilots who risk their lives every weekend with the certainty that everything that happens behind the radio, the screens, and the data is focused on protecting them and giving them the best possible tools. When that trust is broken, what's left is not just disappointment. It's a crack that can destroy an entire season or a professional career. That is exactly what has exploded at McLaren after the 2025 Las Vegas Grand Prix. A spectacular circuit, full of lights and promises of spectacle, ended up being the scene of an internal betrayal. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, the two men leading the Woking project, went out onto the track convinced that they had in their hands a car with pace, control, and real chances of victory. What they didn't know was that the team had already detected a critical anomaly and decided to keep it quiet. For more than 50 laps, the two drivers precisely executed every instruction given to them. They followed the orders to lift slightly in certain corners, conserve tires, and manage the pace. The reason? According to what they were told, it was due to tire temperature or fuel consumption. But nothing could be further from the truth. McLaren had detected abnormal wear on the lower part of the car. The famous plank, or skid, a piece of composite wood that acts as a witness to the rake in the height of the car on the asphalt. This component, strictly regulated by the FIA, cannot wear more than 1 millimeter compared to its original thickness. Any value below the minimum allowed implies automatic disqualification. And that's exactly what happened. But the most serious thing was not the technical error. It was a conscious decision not to communicate it to the pilots, to hide it, of allowing them to run to the end without knowing that they were signing a sports sentence. Lando crossed the finish line in second position, with a podium assured that would have extended his lead in the Drivers' Championship. Oscar, with a solid fourth place, consolidated his role as the ideal second sword in the structure. The smiles in the box did not last long. 4 hours later, the FIA published the official statement. Both MCL 39s were disqualified for violating Article 3.5.9 of the technical regulations. And that's when the untransmitted messages, the covert orders, and the awkward silences began to filter through. What seemed like an isolated technical error began to take the form of a structured deception. Image protection. Of decisions made from the top of the team that now put in check everything that McLaren has built in the last 2 years. Because when a team decides to lie to its own drivers in the middle of the race, the consequence is not just a disqualification. It is a fracture of trust that could change the course of the championship, or even cause a silent exodus of its main talents. The first suspicions began to arise even before the race was over. From the wall, the orders were strangely conservative for a circuit like Las Vegas, known for its unpredictable nature, long straights, and a complex surface that requires constant adjustments in real time. But McLaren's strategy seemed more concerned with not taking risks than with attacking. The real reason was not race strategy. It was a technical urgency that was hidden under layers of harmless justifications. Lift a little in turn 6, take care of the front compound, we are in range with Verstappen. Phrases that seem normal in any GP, but that, in retrospect, were part of a carefully constructed narrative to hide the truth. The truth came when the FIA dismantled Lando Norris' car. The precision micrometer used in the post-race check revealed that the skid of car number 4 had wear below the regulatory minimum. Specifically, the measurements marked 8.88 millimeters in the front part of the right skate and 8.93 millimeters in the rear. Just a few tenths below the limit, but enough to activate the most severe penalty, immediate disqualification. In the case of Oscar Piastri, the numbers were even more compromising. 8.74 millimeters on the right rear skate and 8.96 millimeters on the left. In the case of the Australian, the wear represented an infraction that exceeded 25% of the margin allowed by the regulations, which eliminated any possible argument of marginal error or accidental wear. But what really turned this situation into a scandal were not the numbers, but the facts behind them. In a document that was never thought to see the public, it details how McLaren requested a second measurement in the presence of its own representatives. The result was even worse than the initial inspection. The skid, under pressure, collapsed even more, confirming that there was no room for doubt. Both cars were outside the technical regulations. The team then not only knew the fragility of its setup, it had also confirmed internally that the risk was real. And yet, during the race, they chose not to say anything to the drivers. Later leaked radio messages reveal the tone with which this silent crisis was handled. Will Joseph, Norris' engineer, already on lap 5 began asking him to lift and coast in key areas of the circuit. When the driver asked why, the response was a fabricated speech about front tire wear. Something that, seen in context, was not only false, but dangerous, because the pilot relies on that data to know how much he can push. When the FIA ruled on the disqualification of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri from the Las Vegas GP, the sanction was clear and based on objective data. The wear of the lower skid exceeded the limits established by Article 3.5.9 of the technical regulations. At a strictly sporting level, the punishment was unquestionable. However, what has generated a much deeper earthquake is not the infringement itself, but the way in which McLaren chose to deal with it. Because what was penalized was a technical foul. But what was revealed later points to an ethical breach. And that, in Formula One, has consequences that go far beyond a result on the track. First is the impact on the championship. McLaren lost 30 points in a single night that were key to consolidating its leadership in the constructors. Lando Norris, who was comfortably leading the Drivers' Championship with a solid advantage over Verstappen, saw his difference reduced to just 1 point. And Oscar Piastri, who had been climbing positions with surgical regularity, was displaced from the fight for the top 3. But even more important than the numbers was the symbolic blow. McLaren went from being the team that exemplified efficiency, transparency, and progressive development to becoming the center of an internal manipulation scandal. The FIA, for now, has not opened a formal investigation into the cover-up of the drivers. But pressure from media such as Automotor UND Sport, the race and F1 Technical has begun to raise questions about whether there should be regulations that regulate information transparency between team and driver. Because although hiding technical information is not illegal, it does put the integrity of the competition at stake. And that is where ethical reflection comes in. In a sport where the margins are of thousands, and where decisions are made at more than 300 kilometers per hour, the pilot needs to blindly trust what his engineer tells him on the radio. If that trust is lost, the basic dynamic that allows you to compete at the limit is broken. What happened at McLaren has sparked a conversation in the paddock that goes far beyond a specific sanction. What responsibility does a team have when it decides to hide a critical problem? Should there be regulatory consequences for these types of omissions? In parallel, the scandal has caused a domino effect within McLaren's own structure. Internal hierarchies have begun to be reviewed, and there are unconfirmed reports that part of the strategy team has been temporarily sidelined while internal pre-race radio and telemetry messages are analyzed. Although Woking insists that it was a tactical misinterpretation, the truth is that the personnel changes and emergency meetings indicate something deeper, an attempt to contain a rift that threatens to destabilize the entire season. But the most dangerous repercussion may not be on the track or in the FIA offices. It's in the public's perception. The fans, who had embraced the narrative of McLaren as the new clean and promising force in the category, today find themselves questioning that narrative. Because when a team lies to its drivers, what prevents us from thinking that it can also manipulate the outside world? And that is the true sanction. One that is not erased with points recovered, nor with a victory in the next race. A sanction that will remain, even if they lift the 2 titles in Abu Dhabi. What happened at the Las Vegas Grand Prix will not only mark the 2025 season, it could mark a new era in the modern history of Formula One. Because what broke that night was not a flat bottom. It was a promise. The promise that the drivers are a central part of decision-making, that their trust in the team is non-negotiable, and that the values of transparency are not just a marketing campaign. This case forces us to rethink fundamental questions about the current structure of sport. In a category where each component is measured in microns, how is ethics measured? Where is the line between tactical strategy and manipulation? And what real consequences do violating the emotional contract that unites a driver with his team have? McLaren's situation is especially painful because it embodied the most powerful redemption narrative of the last 5 years. A team that went from being the joke of the paddock in 2018 to challenging giants in 2024. That recovered its prestige based on technical work, clear direction, and a young, talented, and committed pair of drivers. But all that could fall apart faster than it took to dismantle the bottom of MCL 39 in Las Vegas. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.